Welcome, my name is Henry Louis Gates Jr. And it gives me an enormous amount of pleasure on behalf of Harvard's new president, Lawrence S. Bacow. Give it up for the brother right here. And the chairman of the board of the Hutchins Center for African and African American Research, Glenn H. Hutchins. On whose behalf I welcome you to the 6th Annual Hutchins Center Honors. Now this year, what brings together the people that we're honoring on this stage, perhaps more than ever, is the commitment to protect diversity, inclusion, equal rights, civil rights, and human rights no matter what. And no one is in the fight for these values more deeply than Harvard's 29th president, inaugurated just this past Friday, Lawrence S. Bacow. Larry Bacow, like his predecessor, our outstanding president, Drew Gilpin-Faust. Give it up for Drew. Larry is steadfast in his commitment to our university's cardinal virtues. And what are they? Freedom of thought, freedom of speech, and diversity with excellence in the selection of our students, our faculty, and our administrators. In fact, in his letter to the Harvard community, published just yesterday, President Bacow reminded us of what makes Harvard a university that embodies a rare combination of reverence for tradition while simultaneously nurturing the ground for the boldest forms of innovation. And this is what he wrote. Every day on our campus provides countless opportunities to learn, both from the vast intellectual resources at our disposal, and from those we encounter who make this community special. We have and will continue to embrace and celebrate diversity in every possible dimension. Ladies and gentlemen, this country needs to hear those words. Give it up for Larry Bacow. And the person who makes this grand annual event possible, whose foresight, whose intelligence, whose engagement, and most of all, whose generosity empower the work we do here every day, who along with his brilliant wife, my friend Debbie Hutchins, has given more generously, think about this, to the field of African and African American study than anyone else in the history of our field at any time or any place. Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for my friend Glenn H. Hutchins. For as much as we have to celebrate, for as blessed as each of us is to be fortunate enough to experience the freedom of thought and independence of mind so cherished and valued by our university, our society, to be honest, faces difficult times. When we recall the dramatic progress we've made in the history of this country's struggle for civil rights, it's tempting to remember only our long arc of progress, and even to assume the continuation of that progress to be inevitable. But ladies and gentlemen, we find ourselves today at a new nadir in our country's race relations, somewhat akin to the period following Reconstruction after the Civil War, when the blessings of freedom proffered by emancipation were brutally, intentionally, and systematically chipped away, leaving in their wake injustice, disenfranchisement, the convict lease system, a seemingly endless cycle of poverty for so many of the freedmen and the freedwomen trapped in the misery of sharecropping, and the institutionalization of separate but equal, so-called, as the law of the land. Now, I don't want to take time away from the achievements of our brilliant honorees this afternoon by cataloging the systemic and structural abuses that we see today in the long backlash to the civil rights movement and, to be honest, to the tenure in the White House of the first Black American president. While the march toward gender and racial equality and the embrace of cultural diversity has achieved so much, which we must applaud, which we must celebrate, to some of our fellow citizens, these same realizations of the potential of American democracy have been threatening, challenging the way things had always been. Now, not only have we far to go, but even the distance we've traveled is under siege. These new tribalist developments, which take strength from too familiar narratives of domination and entitlement, are for many of us exhausting and overwhelming. We want to turn CNN off. We want to silence our cell phones. We want to close our eyes. But among us, there are those who draw on the long history of struggle to fight the powers that be. Activists fighting historic injustices, educators raising up a new generation of leaders, artists speaking truth to power through visual media and comedic genius, corporate leaders and philanthropists directing profits and wealth to social betterment, and even professional athletes giving up their careers for an irrefutably just cause. In drawing strength from these heroes among us, let us also find resolve in the words of the scholar and activist whose life inspires this occasion, W.E.B. Du Bois. As the editor of the NAACP's flagship magazine, The Crisis, Du Bois exhorted his generation as he exhorts us now, and I quote, "Agitation is a necessary evil to tell of the ills of the suffering. Without it, many a nation has been lulled to false security and preened itself with virtues it did not possess. Our function is to tell this nation the crying evil of race prejudice. It is a hard duty, but it is a necessary duty, a divine duty." In 1895, Du Bois became, of course, the first African American to earn a PhD at Harvard, whose motto is veritas, or truth. And I must say, for our generation, Harvard has become, to my delight, a key point of resistance against the forces that want to undo all of the progress we've made over the last half century. Consider the extraordinary transformation in the role of women and people of color at this university over just the last 2 decades. Changes that would have absolutely astonished W.E.B. Du Bois. To name just a few, the magnificent service of our first female president, her appointment of 3 stellar Black female deans of the Harvard Graduate School of Education, the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health, and the Radcliffe Institute for Advanced Study. The recent appointment by President Bacow of our extraordinarily talented colleague, Professor Claudine Gay, as the Dean of the Faculty of Arts and Sciences. Her appointment of the brilliant W.E.B. Du Bois Professor of the Social Sciences, my friend Lawrence Douglas Bobo, as Dean of the Social Sciences. We have a faculty that is more various than at any point in Harvard's history, and a dazzling student body that is more racially and socioeconomically diverse than ever before. With the university's leadership expressing the firmest of commitments to diversity and to ensuring that we foster an environment in which all students, faculty, and visitors feel a true sense of belonging. The new truth of Harvard is its deep and unshakable commitment to excellence in whatever forms excellence might assume. And from that commitment, ladies and gentlemen, we shall never, never waver. Make no mistake about it, we as a university have made tremendous progress over the last half-century. Individuals can make a difference. To take just one example, Harvard, like hundreds of other colleges, responded to Dr. King's assassination in April 1968 by seeking to increase its number of students of color. The dean of admissions at the time, a man named Chase Peterson, hired a black man, John Harwell, the first African-American employed by the admissions office, recruited from a counseling job in Chicago in the fall of 1968. Then Chase recruited a guy named David Evans. David Evans, who had a master's degree in chemical engineering from Princeton, and who was working as an engineer with IBM in Huntsville, Alabama, on the Saturn Apollo project during the fall and winter of 1969 and 1970. Dave took what he intended to be a short leave of absence from IBM to help Harvard recruit black students. The last time I checked, Dave was still on leave. Working under the leadership of William Fitzsimmons, Dave and his colleagues began expanding the university's search incrementally, student by student, for what we might think of as splendid inquisitiveness in uncommon forms. The result, since then, the admission of no less than 5,500 undergraduate students of color, all since Dave Evans decided to sacrifice his chosen profession and help Bill Fitzsimmons and their colleagues in the admission office help Harvard to broaden the intellectual complexion of our student body. And let's not forget another transformation just as remarkable. From a ratio of 4-to-1 women to men in 1970 to a slight majority of female undergraduates in the college today. We must never underestimate the power of one individual to make a difference. Ladies and gentlemen, please give it up for our colleague, David Evans, who will soon celebrate his 50th anniversary working in the Harvard College Admissions Office. Now, I emailed Dave this morning and told him that we were going to give it up for him. He emailed me, said he couldn't be here because he was out in the hinterlands scouring around trying to find more black people to get admitted in the Harvard. Before I make way for my friend Glenn Hutchins, before we celebrate the achievements of these 8 remarkable individuals, by the way, Bryan Stevenson is coming. His plane was delayed because of the weather, but he's in the air and he'll be here. Before we celebrate the achievements of these 8 remarkable individuals assembled on this stage this afternoon, each who has also made such a profound difference in our world, let me cite these wise words of Dr. King. I refuse to accept despair as the final response to the ambiguities of history. I refuse to accept the idea that the isness of man's present nature makes him morally incapable of reaching up for the eternal oughtness that forever confronts him. I refuse to accept the idea that man is mere flotsam and jetsam in the river of life, unable to influence the unfolding events which surround him. I refuse to accept that mankind is so tragically bound to the starless midnight of racism and war, and I'm sure today that Dr. King would have added sexism, homophobia, and xenophobia, that the bright daybreak of peace, he continued, and brotherhood can never become a reality. Ladies and gentlemen, in refusing to accept the low bar of hate, injustice, and division, Dr. King resolved to dedicate his life to bending the arc of the moral universe toward justice. Now, in this sometimes trying, sometimes troubling moment, we must join hands across our differences of ethnicity, religious belief, gender, sexual preference, nationality, and class to bend that arc back toward the ideal of justice that some are trying to wrest from our grasp. Ceremonies like this one remind us of the leaders in our midst who do this on a daily basis, not because it's easy, not because it's popular, not for profit, but precisely because they now know that the moment has come to do the hard work of standing tall, agitating, effecting change, and never, never turning back. Ladies and gentlemen, please give it up for the 2018 recipients of the W.E.B. Du Bois Medal, and welcome my friend Glenn Hutchins.